Welcome everybody to Bala One Day Numeracy Academy Module 3. The topic in focus for this module is multiplicative operations and fractions. Let's begin. Let's look at the outcomes for this session. At the end of this training session, you should have a deeper understanding of the importance of developing learners' multiplicative thinking, laws of multiplication, the value of different resources for teaching and learning multiplication, the difference between grouping and sharing, teaching multiplication and division as inverse operation, and teaching sharing that leads to fractions using different wholes. 1, 2, and 3 focus on multiplication. In lesson 1, you will learn about identifying multiplication patterns, which are important because these help us to use what we know to find out what we don't know. For example, look at the image I have in the middle of the left side of our slide. I've got 4 times table going down in the blue column, and then I've got the 8 times table in the green column. So for someone like me, I've always struggled with my 8 times table. But when I saw the pattern or the link between the 4 times table and the 8 times table, that really helped me. So if I did not know what 6 times 8 was, but I knew that 6 times 4 is 24, I could simply double 24 and I'd get the answer to 6 times 8, which is 48. If I did not know what 9 times 8 was, I could think of 9 times 4, which is 36. I double that answer to work out that 9 times 8 is 72. This is only one example of how patterns in multiplication help us to be more efficient and help learners to use what they know to figure out what they don't know. So times tables and number relationships are also important when teaching multiplication. I've got a picture on the bottom left of the screen. This is an idea that was shared with me, and I thought, well, this is great. Let me share it with others too. So when I taught grade 3, we would build certain times tables, whether we were teaching the 3 times table or 4 times table. I would have learners write out exactly like we see there in that middle column. Like 1 times 4 is equal to 4, 2 times 4 is equal to 8, and so forth. But then I saw the idea of having an image that was linked to the table that you're building. So that, even though it looks very small, is an image of a car. Children know that cars have 4 wheels. So when I write 1 times 4 is equal to 4, I say one car with 4 wheels has 4 wheels in total. And for the next line, I'm going to get 2 pictures of the same car. And then I'm going to write 2 times 4 while I say that 2 cars with 4 wheels each have 8 wheels in total. And that way I can go along and have learners help me as I write the times table on the board, because building those tables before trying to learn them by rote is important, because here learners are going to see the relationships between numbers and it's going to make sense to them. Language also figures in lesson 1, and just like with additive thinking, when we multiply or divide, our use of language is also very important. Words like multiply, times, groups of, sets of, and so forth are all the mathematical terms that learners should become familiar with, and that will happen when the teacher uses precise mathematical language. How our language changes, for example, when we were doing additive reasoning that involved addition and subtraction, our questions were normally how many more or how many less of this or that. But our language when dealing with multiplication will be how many times more. So there is definitely a scalar effect in the type of language that we use. In lesson 2, we focus on multiplication using resources like base 10 blocks. They are excellent for teaching multiplication to early grade learners. And the array is also an exceptional resource to use, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Then multiplication as repeated addition. That is usually how multiplication is introduced to very young learners. But it's important for the teacher to know that repeated addition is not the only situation that gives rise to the need to multiply to find an answer. Okay? For example, a learner could have a problem like Farmer Brown plants 10 rows of trees. He puts 8 seeds in each row. How many trees did he plant? A word problem like that immediately creates an image of an array of rows and of columns. Okay? Equal rows and equal columns. So I want to talk about using the array for multiplicative thinking. I'm assuming that you know what an array is, but just to make it clear, it is an arrangement of objects, usually dots, in rows and in columns. And if we look to my picture on the left-hand side, you'll see a table with 4 rows and 2 columns. And there are orange dots in each block. So when I describe an array, the convention is to first say the number of rows and then the number of columns. So if I describe that array, the top one, I would say it's a 4 by 2 array, meaning 4 rows and 2 columns. Or it could also mean 4 rows with 2 in each row. So the power of this array, let's say I want to introduce the idea of commutativity in multiplication. But I'm not going to use that word. I'm just going to show children this lovely image, and it can be an image just like I have there with 4 rows and 2 columns. And I could ask my class, hey guys, how many dots do you think there are all together? You'll have some children maybe counting in ones, maybe some would count in twos, I don't know. But the class needs to establish that there are 8 dots altogether. When everyone is happy that there are 8 dots, I could then point out the idea of groups. Oh, okay, because I could either group each row 2, 2, 2, 2, and we could count in twos until we get to 8. I could then use the same picture, a different color pen, and group the columns. And now we could all count in fours and go 4, 8. Okay, so now we need to have a little talk. What was quicker, to count in ones, to count in twos, or to count in fours? After a class discussion, we will come to the conclusion that it was actually quicker to count in fours. So now we've established that there are 8 dots in total. Okay, I've introduced this image as an array, and we have seen that there are 4 rows and 2 columns. So what I usually like to do with very young children, it always works, is to get them to understand what a row is. A row goes from left to right or right to left. And I would get them to use their arms to actually make a line from right to left or left to right. After that, we would do the same with column. So a column means, the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. So I would get them to use their arms to establish this understanding of what is a row and what is a column. So after we've worked with this array, 4 by 2, we've established there are 8 dots in total. We can count in ones or twos or fours, but the quickest was to count in 4. I then show them how to write what we've spoken about using a multiplication number sentence, like 4 times 2 is equal to 8. And I'll tell them that we like to write the number of rows first, and then we write the number of columns. And that is something that will have to be, reiterated over time so children get used to the idea, because that is a convention, as I said earlier. Still with this array, this image of 4 rows, 2 columns, and it is equal to 8. And I've written on the board that 4 times 2 is equal to 8, or I've written somewhere. I now take that same image and I rotate it 90 degrees so that learners now see a different array. Now they see the array at the bottom. No more 4 rows, but now there are 2 rows. No more 2 columns, now there are 4 columns. So this new array, in inverted commas, is now called a 2 by 4 array. So I want to know from learners, how many dots are there in total? They already counted it. We did not add any dots. We did not take anything away. So they know there are 8. So now I write the number sentence, 2 times 4 is equal to 8. And after doing a few more examples, like 3 times 5, and then rotating the array to show 5 times 3. And I could do it with 3 times 4. But I would use numbers that learners are familiar with in terms of saying the multiples of either 5 or 4 or 3. I'd use those numbers. And we would then establish that, oh gosh, it doesn't matter which number comes first, the answer is always the same. We know that is the commutative law, but we don't have to say that to learners. As long as they understand that we can swap those numbers, the answer stays the same. The other important thing about an array image is that in that image, you see the first number, which is the number of rows, or we can call it a factor or a multiplicand if we want, but we obviously wouldn't use those words with very young learners. But we see the first number, we see the second number in that number sentence, and we see the total. So one image shows all of those things. In lesson 3, you learn about the laws of multiplication. Commutativity we already spoke about, but there are other laws like the associative law, the distributive law, and so forth. In the top left-hand corner, I show you a calculation 7 times 7, and I show also there how the use of an array can actually prove the distributive law and why it works. So if a learner has to solve 7 times 7 but does not know that answer as a known fact, she can break that first 7 up into 5 and 2, because 5 times 7 is easier for her to work out, and 2 times 7 is also easier. So 5 times 7 is 35 and 2 times 7 is 14. She simply has to add those two numbers to get her answer of 49. What that array shows, firstly, it's a 7 by 7 array. That means 7 rows and 7 columns. The first 5 rows are colored green. So that shows 5 rows and 7 columns, and that links to the calculation 5 times 7 is 35. The next 2 rows are colored blue, and they show 2 times 7, which was previously worked out. 2 times 7 is 14. So by breaking the array up in different ways, laws that apply to multiplication can be made clearer. In lesson 3, you're also going to see how base 10 blocks can be used to teach multiplication. I want to quickly go through the example I have on the left of a calculation 4 times 12. When learners get into the double-digit number range, they quickly learn that 10 is a friendly number. Okay? If a learner does not know 4 times 12 as a known fact, again, using the distributive law, she could now break up the 12 into, 4 times 10 and 4 times 2. So we see in that first picture how 4 times 12 is shown as a green rod of 10 and 2 ones, so that's 12. Another green and 2 showing 12. So we see 4 12s. The arrow shows what would really be the next step to group all the 10s and group all the ones. 4 times 10, that is an easy one to work out because, as I said, 10 is a friendly number. Children easily learn, multiplying 1, 2, 3, 4 by 10, okay? And then 4 times 2 is again another easy known fact. So when they know that 4 times 10 is 40, 4 times 2 is 8, they simply have to add the 2 to get the final answer. Assessments are also dealt with in lesson 3 and all the various ways learners can be assessed. In the next slide, you're going to need your smartphone because I want you to scan a QR code where we see how multiplying with base 10 blocks actually plays out in a real classroom. I'd now like you to scan the QR code that you see on the slide and watch the video. It's just over 4 minutes long. In this video that is entitled Multiplicative Reasoning 4, we see how children use base 10 blocks in the class to multiply. Before you watch the video, I'd like you to think about these 4 questions. What multiplicative concept or concepts are being dealt with in the lesson? Do all children seem to be doing what the teacher asked them to do? And explain why you say yes or no. How does the teacher direct the thinking of a pair of learners or a pair of children? And how did the teacher extend what children were doing with the concrete resource? Please watch the video now. Well, I hope you had a lovely time watching that video on multiplicative reasoning and answering those 4 questions for yourself. I'm now going to give you my answers and you can see whether yours are different or similar. Number 1, what multiplicative concept or concepts are being dealt with in the lesson? Well, I saw repeated addition leading to multiplication, and I saw the distributive law of multiplication. Did you see anything else? Number 2, do all children seem to be doing what the teacher asked them to do? No, which is indicative of a normal classroom. Isn't that so? Why I say no is because I could see one learner making patterns with these blocks. Maybe you've seen learners doing something else, which is normal in a classroom. Number 3, how does the teacher direct the thinking of a pair of children? The teacher goes to one desk and gets the children to explain what they are doing. She then asks them questions to guide their thinking. Number 4, how did the teacher extend what children were doing with the concrete resource? So I saw the teacher consolidating what learners did concretely by firstly doing the same on the board and then overlapping the concrete representation with the abstract symbolic notation. Research tells us that when children learn any new concept, that multiple representations are what builds deeper conceptual understanding. So when the teacher used her own base 10 blocks on the board and then overlapped it with a symbolic notation, that is an example of a more concrete representation with a more abstract or symbolic representation. So that was great. Lessons 4, 5, and 6 of Module 3 deals with grouping and sharing. So now we're going to talk about the other part of multiplicative reasoning, which is division. Okay? Now, halving and doubling are covered in lesson 4, and these are introduced using play pedagogy. We spoke about that previously. We said that learners, young children, naturally learn through play. So, for example, in the top left-hand corner, I have taken an excerpt from a Balawande activity for grade 1s. And the teacher in this case would have spoken about ladybugs. They're so cute. Children love them. And they would have spoken about how the same number of dots are on each side of those ladybugs' wings. So this is now where children would do individual work after having done lots of concept development in whole class setting. But if we look at the picture on the left, we see a ladybug that only has dots on the left wing. So here, the learner would have to draw the same number of dots on the right wing. So there are 5 dots on the left. She will have to draw 5 dots on the right, and then 5 and 5 altogether will give 10. On the picture to the right of that, we see a ladybug with dots on both her wings. She has 4 dots on one wing and 4 dots on the other wing. And now we want to find out what is half. Altogether these dots are 8, but what is half? And here learners know that it's the same on either side. So maybe they're going to color only one wing, or they're going to circle the dots on only one wing. But these are playful ways that children can be introduced to important concepts that are important for multiplicative thinking, which is doubling and halving. Maths language in division is just as important as for every other operation. So words like sharing and grouping, remainder and dividing, the teacher has to use precise mathematical language, and in that way encourage learners to do the same, so that when they explain their thinking or their working, they can do so in a manner that all can understand. Patterns in division are also important and also dealt with in lesson 4. For example, we know that numbers ending in 0 or 5 are divisible by 5. There are certain patterns in our number system that make our calculations and our mathematical thinking just easier and more efficient. In lesson 5, you learn about the laws of division. Now this is exciting. I've got a picture that is actually taken from your module. The picture on the bottom left, the blue picture, right, showing all those lovely shapes. You know, I found one of them to be really interesting. The shape on the far left side with 9 at the top. It says the sum of the digits must be divisible by 9. Okay, so does that mean any number, if I add the digits and the sum thereof is divisible by 9, then that big number is divisible by 9? Well, you know, I practiced and I wanted to see if this is really so. So I took numbers like 162 because I knew if I add the 1 to the digit 6 and the digit 2, it makes 9. And of course, 9 is divisible by 9. I then thought, let me just be a bit more, I don't know, courageous and go for a bigger number. And I chose 2016, okay? Because I wanted to also see if having a 0, as a placeholder, if this law or this rule will hold true. Why don't you do it for yourself with any number and just see how these divisibility rules work? Also, in lesson 5, we're going to go through grouping and in lessons 4, 5, and 6, the focus is on grouping and sharing. In lesson 4, you'll learn about doubling and halving using play pedagogy. Maths language in division also comes into play, and we know that maths language in every topic that we've covered is very important. Patterns in division, just like patterns in multiplication, also come into lesson 4. In lesson 5, you learn about the laws of division as well as grouping and sharing. Grouping and sharing both deal with division but speak to different ways in which young learners make sense of different division situations. Young learners will enact a grouping problem differently to a sharing problem. For example, if a learner has to share 20 sweets between 4 children, the action of that learner will be a one-by-one action. She will give each learner one at a time until all have one, and then give another one, and then another until all 20 sweets have been shared. If the learner has 20 sweets and the question is, how many groups of 4 can you make from 20? The learner will take 4 sweets at a time and put them in a pile or a group. So she'll make one pile of 4, another pile of 4, another pile of 4 until all 20 sweets are done. This is not a one-by-one sharing action, but rather this is a grouping action. In the sharing example, the answer was the number of sweets in each group. And to find that answer, the learner had to only count the number of sweets in one group because all the other groups would have the same number, and she would then have her answer. In our grouping question, the answer is the number of groups. Not the number in each group, but the number of groups. So for a sharing problem, the question is how many in each group. For a grouping problem, the question is how many groups. If we look at our screen, I have an example in the top with a blue background which reads how many in each group. There are 85 flowers. There are 5 friends. How many flowers should each friend get? Working with this big number, a learner might not want to give 1, 1, 1 at a time. If she can count in twos, she could give 2 at a time. Or she could give 3 or 5. But there would be a one-by-one action. In the problem at the bottom of that, it reads, how many groups? There are 72 biscuits. I put 4 biscuits in a box. How many boxes do I need? There, the action will be making a group of 4, group of 4, a group of 4, a group of 4. So the action will be making groups of a certain number. Now the question is, how many boxes do I need? And boxes there represent groups. So we have a cute creature there on the top right corner that says sharing when we know how many groups but not how many in each group. So that is our clue for knowing a sharing problem. And this cute little girl at the bottom says grouping when we know how many in each group, but not how many groups. So I'd like you to look at the 2 examples at the bottom of the screen. And I want you to see if you can work out which one is sharing and which one is grouping. So I purposefully made many aspects the same so that it wouldn't be just like, easy to just discern which is which. So let me read the question in blue. Teacher has 20 crayons. She puts 5 crayons in each box. How many boxes does she need? There we see the answer sentence will be 20 divided by 5 is equal to 4. And so the answer is 4 boxes. Now my question is that a sharing problem or a grouping problem? The next problem reads, teacher has 20 crayons. She gives 5 children the same number of crayons. How many crayons does each child get? Again, the answer sentence is 20 divided by 5 and it's equal to 4 and each child gets 4 crayons. Which is grouping and which is sharing? I'm going to give you 2 seconds to think about it and then we're going to carry on our conversation. You've had about 2 seconds and I'm hoping that you saw that the blue problem, the teacher with 20 crayons and she puts 5 crayons in each box, which means she knows how many are in a group. What she didn't know was how many groups. The question was, how many boxes does she need? So how many groups of 5 were there in 20? So that's a grouping problem, which means the second problem, where the teacher gives 5 children the same number of crayons, how many crayons does each child get? When we know how many groups, in this instance, each child represented a group. What we did not know was how many would be in each group. Now the teacher may not have given 1, 1, 1 each. Maybe she gave 2 each. And then she still had a lot more and she gave another 2 to each of those 5 children. And then with the last 5 crayons she had, she gave them 1 each. Oh, I think I'm giving the wrong. She had 5 children and 20 crayons. So if she had given each of those 5 children 2 crayons and then seen that she still had more, she could have given again 2 crayons. And so each one would have ended up with 4 crayons. So sharing and grouping, we know that they are important because young children will enact those problems differently. In lesson 6, you'll learn about division stories linked to grouping and sharing. Division and remainders are also important because there are some remainders that can be shared further, which leads to fractions, and there are other remainders that cannot be shared. For example, if 3 children were sharing 4 chocolate bars, they could each get 1 chocolate, and then they'll have to share that 4th chocolate by breaking it into 3 equal parts. But if those children, the 3 children, had 4 balloons, they would each get 1 balloon, but the 4th balloon could not be cut into equal parts because then it would break. So those are the types of situations children have to be exposed to. And of course, sharing leading to fractions also figures within lesson 6. In lesson 7, our focus is on multiplication and division as inverse operations. The image in the top left hand of the screen shows 5 boxes of crayons, and there are 10 crayons in each box. Linked to this image, one could write 5 times 10 is equal to 50. If we use our idea of multiplication and what the multiplication number sentence means, that 5 groups with 10 in each group means that there are 50 altogether. Linked to this multiplication sentence is also a division number sentence. Here we can think that, well, there are 50 crayons altogether. If we divide them into 5 groups, there will be 10 crayons in each group. Now, also linked to 5 times 10 is another multiplication sentence, 10 times 5. Children learn the laws of multiplication as they go along, and they learn that whether you change those factors or those numbers, the answer remains the same. So 10 times 5 is also equal to 50. And if we link it to a division number sentence, we can say 50 divided by 10 is 5. Over time, children come to learn that the idea of a number family or a number triple that they learned with additive thinking also applies to multiplicative thinking. In the task at the bottom, I have taken an excerpt from one of the tasks in our books, and all the Bala One Day material is open access and it's free online. Let's look at what happens in this task. In the gray block, so the gray block will always be the worked example. We see 3 numbers circled, 36 and 5. These 3 numbers make up the number family. From this, we can write 2 linked multiplication number sentences and 2 linked division number sentences. And these are actually filled in because it is, as I said, a worked example. So we see 6 times 5 is equal to 30 and 5 times 6 is equal to 30. 30 divided by 6 is equal to 5 and 30 divided by 5 is equal to 6. Now, to the right of that worked example, we see a learner example. There are also 3 numbers that are circled, given as a number family: 32, 4, and 8. And from this number family, children now have to write 2 multiplication number sentences and 2 linked division number sentences. So they would write 4 times 8 is equal to 32 and 8 times 4 is equal to 32. 32 divided by 4 is equal to 8 and 32 divided by 8 is equal to 4. The graphics that are given in that task is just simply to lighten the cognitive load for the learners so that they have more headspace to think of the relationships between the numbers that they are filling in. In later tasks, those type of graphics will not be there because children by then would have gotten used to the idea that there are multiplicative number families and that from 4 times 8 is equal to 32, they can write another multiplication number sentence and 2 linked division number sentences. So these are examples of the tasks that learners would do to practice and to build their confidence in understanding the relationship, the inverse relationship between multiplication and division. What I have on the right are 2 word problems. Also, just to show you, to give you an idea that the inverse of multiplication and division can also be used to solve word problems. In the word problem on the top, mother has 42 flowers. She puts 7 flowers into each flower pot. How many flower pots does she need? So, how the child usually reasons is, well, how many 7s are there in 42? So, if 42 divided by 7 is not a known fact for that learner, that child can think of, well, what times 7 is 42? So he was initially thinking of 42 divided by 7, but that wasn't ringing any bells. But that learner can also think of what times 7 is equal to 42. And if she knows maybe her 6 times table, she'll know that 6 times 7 is 42. And if she knows 6 times 7 is 42, then that means 42 divided by 7 is 6. And the answer is mother will need 6 flower pots. In the second problem, Putti has 40 sweets and 5 boxes. She wants to put the same number of sweets into each box. How many sweets will go into each box? Well, what is 40 divided by 5? I mean, that is really what you want to know. But if 40 divided by 5 is not a known fact, you can think of 5 times what is 40? And thinking of times tables is usually easier for learners. And 5 times 8 is 40, so that means 40 divided by 5 is 8. Can you see how we started with a division problem? We used a multiplication fact, and then we could solve our division problem. And the answer to that problem is that there are 8 sweets in a box. Children can use multiplication and division as inverse operations to solve written and word number problems. Lessons 8, 9 and 10 deal with fractions. The concept of fraction grows from a concrete understanding of a part of a whole to an abstract understanding of a fraction as a number. In Lesson 8, you will focus on fractions as part of wholes, but also continuous and discontinuous wholes. To the right of the screen, I have got an image showing continuous whole at the top and 3 little explanations below. Continuous wholes are single items that make up the whole, also called unit wholes. Continuous wholes are fraction parts that are equal in size and into which the unit whole has been divided. Examples are an orange, a piece of paper, a slab of chocolate, a circular disc, or a loaf of bread. The pictures I have around that is of a red ribbon, so the entire length of that ribbon is a continuous whole. The loaf of bread is a continuous whole, and the slab of chocolate is a continuous whole. Discontinuous wholes are different because a discontinuous whole is a group of items that together make up the whole. Fraction parts are equal-sized groups. The same number of items will be in each group. Examples of discontinuous wholes: 15 oranges, 6 biscuits, 27 counters, or 4 new pencils. The pictures I have added, I have 14 stars, and the 14 stars together make up a discontinuous whole. 7 apples and then 18 lollipops. In Lesson 8, you will also focus on the language that is linked to fractions as part of wholes. We've always spoken about language being important in every topic of mathematics that children learn. Now, in Lesson 9, you learn about fractional number concepts that make up the content and how they fit together. Certain concepts that make up the curricular content has to be taught in a definite order. Mathematics, as we've said, is one of those subjects that are hierarchical. Children first has to learn some of the more simpler concepts before they move to maybe more abstract ones. So this comes together in Lesson 9. Unitary fractions like 1/3 or 1/5, 1/4, and non-unitary fractions like 2/3 or 3/5, those are also dealt with in Lesson 9. Finding unitary and non-unitary fractions of continuous wholes and discontinuous wholes also figure within Lesson 9. So for example, finding a fraction of a unitary whole, like finding half of a slab of chocolate will be different to, let's say, finding half of a discontinuous whole like those 14 stars. All of that comes into lesson 9 and it is quite exciting. In lesson 10, you will deal with fraction numerals, how we actually write fractions, and the progression from writing fractions using words to writing fractions purely just using symbols. You will also deal with like and unlike fractions, proper and improper fractions too. Equivalent fractions, that always makes me think of the fraction chart that would be on most walls in grade 3 classrooms or whichever classroom deals with fractions, because they would show the whole right at the top, and below they'd show how 2 halves are equal to that whole, and how 3/3 are equal to the whole, and how 4/4 are equal to the whole. And of course it then gets exciting to see, okay, which of the fractions are actually equal to one another. So comparing fractions also comes into lesson 10, and the misconceptions that learners have about fractions. It's important to know what these are and how to deal with that in the classroom. On this slide, I have an example that is taken from your module. So as you work through module 3, you will see this example. I thought that talking through something like this might just, make finding a non-unitary fraction of a continuous whole actually sound not so bad. So in this example, the question is find 5/6 of a square sheet of paper. So the square sheet of paper is the continuous whole, okay? In this example, we've got 3 blocks, and we're going to move from the block on the left to the middle to the one on the right. So if we look at the block on the left, it just shows the whole. Remember, it's a continuous whole. In the middle, we read the whole divided up into 6 parts of equal size. Now what I did is I wrote 1/6 on each of those equal sized pieces, just to make it simpler for you to understand. The square on the right side says 5 of the 6 parts of equal size have been shaded or have been colored in. So 5/6 of the whole has been shaded. So can you see they colored in 5 of those blocks, which were each 1/6. That is why they've colored in 5/6. I'm going to read at the bottom where it says language pattern. The whole is a square sheet of paper. I fold the whole up into 6 parts of equal size in order to find sixths. Each part is 1/6 of the whole. So 5 of the 6 equal parts is 5/6 of the whole. I'm sure this will help you to make more sense of it. In this slide, I've again taken an example from your module because I think talking through it might just make a bit more sense. Finding a non-unitary fraction of a discontinuous whole. Let's just think about that for a minute. Finding a non-unitary fraction simply means that we're not going to find 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4. It will probably be 2/2 or 3/4 or 5 somethings. Okay? And it is of a discontinuous whole. Remember what we said, a discontinuous whole is a group of items that together make up the whole. So we see there, discontinuous whole, find 3/4 of 36 marbles. So there you have it. 3/4 is a non-unitary fraction. Okay? And the 36 marbles, that is the discontinuous whole. So there underneath that we see a picture of those marbles, and altogether those 36 marbles, they make up the whole. Now, to find 3/4 of those marbles, we first have to find 1/4, okay, or divide it into quarters. So what you do is you divide 36 by 4, and that number would be the number that represents 1/4. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. Okay, so in that picture you see the whole divided into quarters. There are 4 groups with 9 marbles in each group. Each of those groups represents 1/4 of the 36 marbles. In the row below that, we'll see that 3 of the quarters have been shaded blue. 3 of those groups, because each group was 1/4. So we've colored in 3. So we've colored 3/4 of 36. So here is the thing. What is 3/4 of 36 marbles equal to? When I read at the bottom at the language pattern, it says the whole is 36 marbles. I divide the whole up into 4 groups of equal size in order to find quarters. There are 9 marbles in each group. One group of 9 is 1/4 of 36. So 3 groups of 9 are 3/4 of 36. So 27 is 3/4 of 36. And how did you get 27? You added those 9s, 9, 18, 27. And we have to remember that when we're finding a fraction of a discontinuous whole, it doesn't matter what type of fraction. It can be a unitary fraction or non-unitary fraction, but the answer will always be a number. Well, we've come to the end of our introduction to Module 3. We looked at developing learners' multiplicative thinking, the laws of multiplication, how children become more efficient as they learn these laws, the value of using different resources when teaching multiplicative thinking, especially the value of the array diagram. We discussed grouping and sharing, I know that what I've spoken about here will resonate with you when you get to chapter 5. Multiplication and division as inverse operations were also covered, and how we can train learners to use their knowledge of their times tables to solve division problems. Lastly, we spoke about division leading to fractions, how children's concept of what a fraction is changes as they find unitary and non-unitary fractions of continuous and discontinuous wholes. I could not cover everything in this introduction, but what I hope I did is whet your appetite before you dive into this exciting module about multiplicative operations and fractions. I'll see you again when we deal with Module 4, which will focus on space and shape, measurement, and data handling.